Want to expand the reach of your content? Start a podcast, feature industry experts on your show, and leverage the influence and reach of your guests to grow your brand. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. I'm your host for today's episode, Sean Blackburn with Sweetfish Media. I'm joined today by Rory Holland. He is the founder and CEO of Customer. Rory, how are you doing today?
Doing great, Sean. Good to be with you.
Fantastic to have you on. Stoked to cover our topic today, the 7 steps for establishing a foundation for growth. But before we jump into that, if you can just tell our listeners a little bit about you and your background and what it is that you guys do over at Customer.
Hey, Sean. Good to be with you today. My name is Rory Holland. I'm the founder and CEO at Customer, and we are a digital marketing and design agency that help companies build their brands and grow systematically and sustainably.
Awesome. Well, today we're talking about just that topic right there. And so I'm stoked to be unpacking this with you. We talk a lot about this within marketing growth, but you guys have a pretty unique way that you approach this. Kind of what's the 50,000 foot view of what you're going to be unpacking for us today?
Yeah, I mean, what companies really want when we talk to prospective clients and we work with our clients is they all want full pipelines. They want to accelerate the velocity of their sales processes and funnel. They want to convert more customers, and bottom line, they just want to generate more revenues. But at a higher level, really to do that and do it in a sustainable and profitable way, you need a growth system. And so what we've put together is a methodology that we'll share a bit more as we go through this, Sean. But it starts with these first 7 steps, really kind of building the foundation for growth.
A lot of times whenever we are forecasting out and as business leaders, we're looking at, the next couple quarters or the full year. The key to some of this is predictability. Is that right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And you want to be able to predict what the future looks like the best that you can based on having that strategy and implementing the systems and processes you need to do that.
You mentioned a methodology. What is it that made you guys decide to have a methodology where some people don't approach it that way? They approach it in maybe a little bit more nebulous or kind of more, I guess you could say organic, not that you guys isn't organic, but what is it that made you come up with this process in the first place?
Well, as marketing has grown, particularly B2B and the digital sphere, there's just so many options, literally hundreds of thousands every day of different types of strategies, tactics, terms like growth hacking, everything. So we created the methodology really out of a need to create order and structure and really a system and a process that could create that predictability and could be repeatable and scalable and sustainable. And so that's really what it came out of.
I love that. And you use an analogy that I really like. Maybe unpack it for the audience. Just the idea of a skyscraper, and how do you relate that back to a business and marketing and growth?
Yeah, it's funny. I just got back from San Francisco. I was out there, and for your audience that might not know, there's something called the Millennium Tower, in San Francisco, and it's sinking. The foundation wasn't established very well, so. Big problems. Same thing can happen in businesses. We see it all the time. So to avoid that and to help our companies really set themselves up for success, we're big believers in establishing a really solid foundation. So much like a Burj Khalifa in Dubai, that's the largest and tallest skyscraper in the world. 2,700 feet. It's got 163 floors. And really to build something at scale like that weighs literally hundreds of thousands of tons. In their case, it required over 400,000 cubic yards of concrete and 105 tons of steel. So this, we as business builders can sense the same thing. Sometimes it feels daunting to really build a company, and it is. So as the skyscrapers go, it starts with digging a really deep hole and then pouring a bunch of concrete and rebar in it. And so what we're going to talk about today is how do you build a solid foundation from which to scale that's not going to topple over as you grow.
Absolutely. And that's a tough thing to really do sometimes in the front end when there's so many things that are, competing for your priority, digging down and going deeper. It takes extra time and extra resources. But what do you think that it looks like to build this, foundation that's solid like this?
Yeah, the truth is the companies that attract more customers and scale are really the ones that have that solid foundation, and they're doing it off of a strategy that is repeatable, predictable, and allows them to profitably acquire more customers. So, the way it looks to us and kind of the way our program works, it really all starts with understanding your target customers. So if we could maybe, Sean, just kind of jump in to,
I would love that.
Yeah, jump into the process. So before I get into the 7 steps here, I'm going to raise it back up a little bit. So the methodology that we've created is called the growth engine. And the growth engine is our proprietary methodology and approach that we actually work with inside of with our clients. And the beginning phases of that, it's four pillars, if you will: plan, build, launch, and grow. What we're going to talk about today are the plan and build pieces in those particular pillars that really help to establish that foundation. So in these first 2 pillars, there are 7 steps to establishing your foundation and to really build a systematic and predictable growth system. The first one is knowing your customers. It seems obvious, right, Sean? We're in business. We create a product or solution to reach a particular market, but there's a lot of companies out there that we could do a better job of really knowing our customers. They're not just a demographic or a psychographic. They're not just a size of a company or a number of employees or a particular job title. What is it that really makes them tick? What influences them, for example? And so really knowing your customer is so critical. So I can name a couple of examples, but essentially, when you think about the B2B market, there's literally hundreds of different types of industries, business sizes, structures. And as we've gone about doing what we do, helping our clients identify their audience and build the personas for the buyers inside of those companies. And that really helps us then craft the strategies that we need to be able to go reach those people once we know what makes them tick. So that's the first of 7 steps.
Right. And you guys mentioned, it's not just job titles. It's not just, industries that you're a part of. Do you guys approach this in any sort of unique way when it comes to, you mentioned really knowing them and knowing what makes them tick? Any sort of advice that you would have for someone as they're maybe doing some persona work or trying to get to know their customers more, something that maybe is commonly overlooked?
Sure. Yeah. The things that I see is we inside of our own businesses tend to work in a vacuum. So we make general assumptions about who our market is, what they want, and how they want to be talked to. And those assumptions can be dangerous because we're doing it from our own perspective. So one technique I would suggest is having interviews. It takes a little bit of time, but craft some smart questions and have a scheduled approach to talking to select either clients to get their feedback about what they think about your business and what they think about what you're doing for them. Or you can identify some potential prospective customers and go talk to them and just ask them for a few minutes. Hey, I just want to ask you some questions about, the industry, our solution, what your problems are. And that will really help you kind of understand at a gut level where they're coming from and have some tangible information to be able to act on.
Love that. And your second step is to dial in the messaging. What is it that you mean by that?
Well, once you know who your customers are, then you want to dial in the messaging, which is really creating the messaging for your business that's going to create what I call an emotional resonance with your audience and your target customers. And that emotional resonance is really going to make their hearts beat fast about what you do for them. that's the kind of emotion you want to get from them. So when they read about what you could do for them, they see your ad, they read your content, they meet you at a trade show, they hear that 30-second pitch. Man, their heart's beating fast. They're going, I got to have that. So if
They're
you
in
do
love,
that,
right?
if you do that and you're mapping it back to those personas, then you've got a winning combination there. If you miss it, and again, this kind of goes back to not knowing your customers. If you miss the target, you're just missing opportunity. And then your funnel becomes a sieve.
Speaking of funnels, I think that you're going to hit on that here in your next point. I know you guys focus on this a lot at Customer, the engaging and thoughtful design. Speak to what sort of benefit a brand can do to really focus on this aspect of their brand.
Well, this is, as you can probably sense, this is building on itself. So much like we're pouring layers of concrete here, and we're starting to throw some rebar in. So we've got the audience definitions. So we've got our personas built. We know who we're going after. And for a lot of us, we're selling into CEOs, CTOs, CIOs, or product managers or production people, right? There's varieties of different people that we want to influence to buy our product. So creating that messaging strategy that really is creating that emotional resonance for each of those target personas to get those winning opportunities. Then once we've done that, and let's just say they're seeing our ads, they're reading our content, they're meeting us at trade shows. The next thing they're going to do is go to our website or visit via their mobile or their desktop. We want to make sure that should it be the main site or any kind of targeted landing pages coming off of ad campaigns or social media campaigns, that we're meeting them with that same kind of experience that made their heart beat fast about us. So that emotional connection from a visual and design standpoint is just as important, if not more, than the messaging itself. So some ways to do that is thinking about what exactly, knowing your audience, the messaging, and then flowing that into for a cohesive experience. What I mean by that is your ad campaigns and the messaging you use should meet that user at that point on your landing page or your website with complementary imagery and very complementary messaging that's going to move them to action. So think about creating emotion.
So I'm not a designer by any sort of the stretch of the imagination. Whenever you say that, I think I know what you mean. But whenever you create imagery or use imagery in that way, what are some of the common things that you're suggesting for people, or maybe just some? I guess I'm trying to ask, what does that mean?
Yeah, what does that mean exactly?
Right.
Well, fortunately, I have a co-founder whose background is design, user experience, and product. And we've been together for more than a decade now. So he's the guy that finds that and has the strategies to do it. But from my perspective and what I see working is I can, pick an example like one of our clients, Biller Genie. And Biller Genie is a SaaS-based solution for small and mid-sized businesses that helps them more efficiently invoice and more quickly collect their money and do it more cheaply than using QuickBooks or other tools. And they fully integrate with QuickBooks as an example. But using them as something that we've been through with them and trying to define their target market, literally thousands and thousands of different small and mid-sized businesses, narrowing it down to some industry sectors that we wanted to focus on, choosing some of those business leaders who we want to really engage with, and then meeting them on the landing pages that we use to bring them into the sales funnel, mapping some of that imagery to the industry as an example. So if you're going after industrial, we'd want to pull industrial type imagery into the page's complementary language that those audiences can receive, versus if, let's just say, we were going after CPA firms, for example, that might work with small and mid-sized businesses. We're going to use very different imagery than what we would do for others.
Makes sense. Yeah, I see what you're saying. And so, like you said, we're laying this foundation. We've, at this point, gone through the first 3 steps, of knowing your customers, dialing in your message, getting that user experience correct on the site itself. What is our next step, and where do we go from here?
Yeah, so the next step is creating a multi-channel acquisition strategy. And this goes back to basically what I call 3 principles of predictable customer acquisition. The first, as we covered, know your customer profile, then target those buyers. 2, build on a scalable foundation. And 3, have a comprehensive and cohesive strategy across multiple channels. So what I'm talking about here in this fourth point, in this fourth step, is that comprehensive and cohesive strategy across multiple channels. What we often see is what I call siloed approach, which is very dangerous, versus a more comprehensive and cohesive approach. That siloed approach can be testing individual channels as if they exist in individual silos, or doing one at a time, for example, and then trying to extrapolate out that performance, when we as consumers don't shop that way. We don't make decisions that way. We don't go to Google Ads and say, you're going to get the bottom of the funnel people, that 1% that are ready to click and take action. But what about those people that see you and then go to your content and then go to social media and then go to LinkedIn? How are you receiving those people and how are you pulling them into your sales funnel? So that's where the kind of comprehensive vantage point and looking at the multi-channels is so important. And then the cohesive part is tying that theme, going back to the personas, into the messaging, and mapping that into your ad campaigns. So there's consistency in messaging, consistency in user experience, and creating that emotional resonance and connection we talked about across all the channels, across all the personas. What that does is it creates trust and credibility versus a lot of companies we see that don't have a comprehensive or cohesive strategy. They're using different messages across different channels, across different personas. What that causes a lack of trust, and you're going to lose a ton of opportunity.
Man, yeah, that makes sense. And you're right. That's how I, evaluate almost anything that I'm looking at these days. I visit 2 or 3 of the channels to just look and see. And I appreciate the focus there to make everything cohesive. I think that's a incredibly smart thing to be getting your customers to do. So we've got some of this strategy laid out for acquiring customers. What's our fifth step?
Fifth step is all about establishing and defining your KPIs and making sure that you have your tracking, importing, and reporting working properly. So for the KPIs, different departments in your company, depending on the size of your company, of course, a lot of us wear lots of hats in small to mid-sized businesses. I know I do myself here. But marketing is going to be looking for certain KPIs, maybe top of funnel activity, middle of the funnel activity to convert to a marketing qualified lead, let's say, where sales is looking for certain touch points and conversion points. So you want to make sure that those KPIs are well defined and that you have the proper tracking in place. You may be using Google Analytics. You may be using Mixpanel. You may be using a marketing automation tool or a CRM system. Whatever tools that you choose to use, make sure that those KPIs are well defined and established and that you have the tracking and reporting in place to be able to track your progress. I mean, that is absolutely critical. And we see all the time, Sean, where companies move too quickly. They haven't really established their foundation. They just want to get out and test and see what happens. And they have some basic levels of tracking and reporting in place. And they quickly learn that they can't properly identify the performance of their campaigns or their sales team. And they get frustrated. And the first response is it doesn't work. And then they're just grinding. So right. I want to make sure that's really clear to people that this is super important.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, especially as our sixth one, not to jump too far ahead, but the sixth one is to begin to build those customer acquisition assets. And, if you're building those things, it's going to be really hard to evaluate success or even evaluate what's working if you don't have that fifth step down correctly. And so I could see the real need to drill down into that. Do you feel like that's you mentioned it's a common thing that you see, what are some of the, I guess, major pitfalls of, jumping ahead too quickly?
Yeah. Well, I want to just comment that there's lots of resources out there for us to be able to get up to speed with, say, I'm going to mention Google Analytics. Some tools we can use, some videos, some things to introduce yourself to it if you're not super confident yet or experienced at it, so that you can make sure that your tracking pixels are being properly placed. The same thing goes for other platforms like LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, etc. So I would just say that that's the pitfalls I see is improper placement and then not looking deep enough and being thorough enough to see how it's performing and testing it into Google Analytics so that you know what you're seeing in Google Analytics is indeed accurate before you start tracking campaigns. And I would say the same thing applies to any ad platform, Google Ads, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, all of those things apply, and there are tracking codes for each of those.
Right.
So I'd say that's a step point that make sure you pause, define your KPIs, confirm that you've got your tracking codes in place, confirm it by testing it. And then once you've got it there, then you're ready to move on to step 7, which we'll get to. But that's kind of the baselines, I would say, Sean.
Yeah, that makes sense. And not to jump ahead past number 6, because I think that is the, many of the people within our audience are sitting within that 6th step. They've got some of this stuff done, or maybe people before them in their position have done some of this, 1 through 5 work, and they're sitting in number 6. What is it what sort of unique insights do you guys have when it comes to building these customer acquisition assets?
Yeah, we look at it going back to creating that emotional connection. So at this point, we know who our audience is. We've created messaging that's going to make their heart beat fast about what we do and engage them. We have talked about and looked at the design elements and the user experience elements to create that emotional resonance with them, to really engage them. We've crafted a multi-channel strategy. We've placed our tracking pixels. We're really clear on what our KPIs are. Now, when we go to build those assets, we're looking back at those personas and looking back at that design strategy and making sure that, again, that's cohesive and complements each of our personas. So that's the continuity, consistency, cohesiveness that comes in. So think back to what we're talking about with different imagery, that we might use some imagery to reach CPA firms versus those that are in the industrial sector. So the same thing kind of applies here, that you want to make sure you're applying that thinking to your banner ads, to your social media ads, to any content that you create, so that you're really engaging the audience.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The 7th step, you mentioned it, it's the activate and testing phase, and then optimizing. This is the recurring part of the process. This one never really ends, does it?
No, it doesn't. And this is, we're talking about going back to the methodology that we follow, plan and build. But following plan and build, we start to touch on what this next step looks like, which is launch and then grow. So the activate testing piece is applying the strategy we just developed and executing it out into the marketplace. So part of that process, we've laid a great foundation here. I'm going to mention kind of one other tool that we use, and this is just for your audience to maybe consider, is when you go to market, we as marketers we need to test certain things. So we've made some assumptions about our market, about the messaging, about the imagery and the user experience and the calls to action. And so we want to be able to test and validate that the messaging did indeed resonate with the market. It did indeed cause the audience or the prospective customers to take the action that we wanted them to. In order to do that, you should make a list of priorities that you want to test and different things around messaging, audience, imagery, calls to action, for example. So we use a tool called the workbook. And the workbook gives us a chance to work with our clients to actually create a list of tests that we want to run and then prioritize them around an algorithm that we use called SIPS. That's SIPS, simplicity, impact, probability, and speed. And so these are tools that we use to help kind of accelerate the process into testing and for us to be able to track and measure, glean insights, and really optimize as we go.
That's great. Yeah, I could see why you guys have had so much success. And, I love the name of your firm, Customer. And, that's the lifeblood of everything that we're talking about with this 7-step process. And, it's really a journey of getting to know your customers. But, when we're sitting here talking to marketers and salespeople who are in a B2B space, what would be your encouragement for them as they're heading into their workday or coming home from their workday here today, listening to this? Whenever they can walk into their office and really take a look at this 7-step framework, what would be your encouragement to them as they potentially take on this new journey of reestablishing these or coming at this for the first time?
First, we believe here at Customer that our clients' best customers are out there just waiting to be discovered. So with this type of an approach, we've seen it really work for marketers and for our clients to be able to go out and really discover those new customers and discover a lot about themselves by engaging their customers in a new way and in more of an authentic way, I would say. And so authenticity and customer centricity, those aren't just words for us. And I'd like to think that for companies that are looking to scale and do it predictably, really knowing their customers and being authentic about what they can offer them. That goes back to, Sean, creating that emotional resonance,
right?
And really creating that emotional connection. People can tell if you're being honest, authentic, and genuine. And I think what I've laid out is this, part of our process here in these 7 steps. It's a process. If you follow it, it will work. But pour your heart into it a bit and really think about your customers and get that connection with them. That's where the magic happens.
I love that. And I think that's a great place that we can wrap this up at. And Roy, I really appreciate, you and your perspective. The 7 steps that you shared with us for establishing a foundation for growth are absolutely pivotal for any business. So if anybody's listening and they have any follow-up questions, they want to connect with you or customer, what's the best way for someone to do that?
Yeah, our website is customer.com. It's CSTMR. Vowels just got in the way, so we removed them.
You guys are anti-vowel, right?
Yeah, right. They can visit our site, and at the top there, I have a free strategy session link. They can schedule a free strategy session, and I can take them through a process and help frame up a growth strategy. Awesome. They can also find us on LinkedIn, find us on social media. We're out there, so they can find us out that way.
Awesome. Well, Rory, thanks again for being on the show. We certainly appreciate you coming on.
Thank you, Sean. I enjoyed it.
We totally get it. We publish a ton of content on this podcast, and it can be a lot to keep up with. That's why we've started the B2B Growth Big 3, a no-fluff email that boils down our 3 biggest takeaways from an entire week of episodes. Sign up today at sweetfishmedia.com/big3. That's sweetfishmedia.com/big3.